guys, Dr. Nicole here talking to you today about whether or not you should do Kegels on the toilet. I know this is something that you've probably heard, right? You've heard it either from your OBGYN or you've read it online. Hey, can you stop the urine stream and do Kegels on the toilet, right? How strong is your pelvic floor? Or how much can you do that and stop the urine stream and then do those exercises to help potentially urinary incontinence or prolapse or some other sort of pelvic floor issue? Well, here's the thing. There's a lot of things to unpack here with that, but we're going to start with the most obvious. Now, pelvic floor muscles are meant when you are peeing to relax, okay? When your pelvic floor muscles relax, it sends a message to your bladder that says, oh, we need to squeeze out this urine. When there's urine in your bladder, you get a message from your brain that says, hey, my bladder's full. You can usually stave off that first urge unless you have something like urinary urgency and or a condition called interstitial cystitis, which makes that urge really strong and really hard to ignore. But most people can ignore that first urge. So then your brain goes, okay, well, you really have to go. And then you get to an appropriate place and an appropriate time. And your brain, and these things are called Bradley loops in terms of the neurological connection between your bladder and your pelvic floor and your brain and your frontal lobe that says this is an appropriate place to go. There's a bunch of them that are going on all at one time. And so your brain says, cool, I'm at a toilet. And you sit down, and for guys, this still happens when you stand up, and your brain then says to your bladder, okay, it's time. And then your bladder squeezes and to get urine out, there's a muscle actually in the lining of your bladder. So it squeezes, and then your pelvic floor at the exact same time, which is normally sort of closed off, all of the sphincters, says, okay, well, since you're squeezing, bladder, it's time to pee. I'm going to relax and let things flow through. Okay, that is the normal function of the urinary bladder and pelvic floor system. Then when you're done, your pelvic floor sort of goes back to a resting tone. It closes off the sphincters. Your bladder then muscle starts to relax, and then the bladder starts filling again, right? So there's two sets of muscles that have to do with urination. There's the one that's actually in the lining of your bladder itself that squeezes, and then there's the pelvic floor part, these guys that control the actual opening to your urethra, and then that can relax and then it can close up. Okay, so there needs to be a very coordinated fashion in order for you to fully empty your bladder and for you to not lose urine when you don't want it to come out. So now here's the deal with Kegels on the toilet. So remember, a Kegel or a Kegel, some people call it that, is a voluntary contraction of the pelvic floor muscles, meaning it is a squeeze closed of the openings of your urethra and your vaginal canal and your rectum. So the problem with Kegels on the toilet is that disrupts that entire system that I just talked to you about, right? You're supposed to be on the toilet, your bladder is squeezing, your pelvic floor is supposed to be relaxing, and that's the normal action. But if you start to then squeeze your pelvic floor, then your bladder gets all confused and it's like, oh no, maybe we aren't going to urinate now. I'm going to stop squeezing urine out. And instead it tries to relax because those things are neurologically linked. And now you've either not gotten the pee completely out, or you now have disrupted the brain's connection of how much urine is actually in the bladder for you to get this appropriate urge when it's the appropriate amount of full. Right? So I know that some people will say, well, it's okay to just do it a couple of times just to check. And man, if you're going to do it at all, you really should only do it like once just to see, can you stop the flow of urine? In a proper pelvic floor contraction, you should be able to stop that flow, but you should not do any contractions of your pelvic floor on the toilet, and for certainly not any repeated contractions, because that just reinforces the message that even though your brain just had to register that your bladder was full, your pelvic floor is saying, nope, not full at all. You need to keep filling up more, right? And so you can see how there's these conflicting messages of what's actually going on in your bladder, which we need accurate representation of in our brains. And then your brain's confused because it's sending a message and then immediately getting another message, and a conflicting one at that. So please, 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 if you are feeling that your pelvic floor is weak, if you've done this, which you shouldn't, but if you have done it and you notice that you can't fully stop the urine stream or it fatigues or something, then you need to get to a pelvic floor physical therapist, because it's not enough just to say that your pelvic floor is weak, right? We have to figure out why that pelvic floor isn't able to perform its normal function. And so please, 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 I'm going to say it one more time. Don't do Kegels on the toilet. Instead, get to your local pelvic floor physical therapist so that they can help you to assess whether or not you need to be doing pelvic floor muscle strengthening in the first place, which, newsflash, time for another video because it's not appropriate for everyone. And number two, we can actually figure out the why behind your pelvic floor dysfunction and why the urination might be an issue for you. So no Kegels on the toilet. I don't care what anyone says. And make sure you listen to your pelvic floor physical therapist who is well trained in the muscles and nerves and ligaments and bones of the pelvis.